Hello everyone, my name is Abhishek and welcome back to my channel. So a few days ago, GitHub announced pricing changes for GitHub Actions and this created a lot of buzz in the DevOps circle. Few people liked it, few people did not like it, but unfortunately, few people got it wrong and this created a lot of misconceptions on the internet. So in today's video, I will explain these pricing changes in very simple words. Especially if you are a DevOps or cloud engineer taking care of CI/CD using GitHub Actions as CI, you should definitely watch this video till the end because it is your responsibility to understand these pricing changes and let your organization know if they are impacted or not. Let's get started. Okay, so to understand the pricing changes better, there is one prerequisite. You should know what exactly is a GitHub runner. In very simple words, if you're using GitHub Actions as CI, GitHub needs compute or it needs an instance on which it can execute your CI steps. And that instance is what we call as GitHub runner. For example, you defined GitHub workflow for one of your repositories where you define jobs like build job, unit test job. Now, every time there is a pull request or every time there is a commit, GitHub should run this workflow. It should build your application. It should run the CI. For that, GitHub needs a compute or GitHub needs an instance. That is what we call as a GitHub runner. Perfect. Now there are two types of runners. One, GitHub hosted runner. Two, self-hosted runner. Now as the name explains, GitHub hosted runner is a managed runner that is provided by GitHub. That means you don't have to create infrastructure. You don't have to create any virtual machine. You just have to tell GitHub, go with the GitHub hosted runner. Now GitHub takes care of everything. Every time you create a pull request or commit, GitHub gets this infrastructure for you and it runs your CI on the managed infrastructure. Now, second thing is the self-hosted runner. Now, in this case, you have to bring your infrastructure. So you have to create a virtual machine, maybe on premises or on cloud platform. And on this virtual machine, you should run a GitHub process, the agent process, and you should configure it as runner within GitHub, right? So that is why we call it self-hosted runner. Now, as of today, that is in 2025, GitHub hosted runners are priced. Basically, they are charged because GitHub is providing you the infrastructure, whereas self-hosted runners are absolutely free of cost. Of course, you have to create this virtual machine somewhere on AWS or Azure. So you will be charged for that. But from GitHub point of view, self-hosted runners are free, whereas GitHub hosted runners are charged by GitHub. Now, what is the pricing change? Very important to understand. There are 2 points in it, right? There are 2 points in this pricing change. Let's start with point number one. So point number one, which is a good news, GitHub is going to offer 40% discount on GitHub hosted runners. Now you can use a Linux runner, you can use Windows runner, doesn't matter. On all of its runners, GitHub is offering 40% discount on the GitHub hosted runners. And this will be effective from 1st of January 2026. Now, second thing, now this is where people have a lot of opinions on the internet. So the second thing is that GitHub is introducing a platform fee of 0.002 US dollars for every minute of execution. Now, this platform fee is applicable for both GitHub hosted runners and self-hosted runners, right? Point one is only applicable for GitHub hosted runners, but point two 0.002 US dollars of platform fee is applicable for both GitHub hosted as well as self-hosted. Now, what does that mean? Let's write for self-hosted runners. Okay. For self-hosted runners, this means, considering both of these points, from 2026, which is technically 31st of March for self-hosted runners, the thing is that previously it was free, but from now, this will be 0.002 US dollars for every minute of execution. Now, what is it for GitHub hosted runners? Basically, for GitHub hosted runners, you get 40% discount, but minus 0.002 US dollars of platform fee. So overall, there is no definite number for this. But what GitHub says is you will get up to 39% because it totally depends. What is the current price? You have to deduct 40% from it, and then you have to add 0.002 US dollars on top of that. Anyways, if you're using GitHub hosted runner, you are on the profit. For your organization, you are at the benefit. Whereas if you're going with self-hosted runner, then you will be introduced to new 0.002 US dollars for every minute of execution. I hope this is absolutely clear. If this is clear, we will move to the next thing. Now, who all are eligible for these changes? First thing, if you are using GitHub Enterprise, you don't have to worry. These pricing changes are not applicable. As per GitHub documentation, enterprise users, they don't have to worry about these pricing changes. But if you're using a free GitHub account, or if you're a pro user, right? Or if you're using any different license of GitHub, then you will be applicable with this pricing changes for private repositories. That means if you're using public repositories, if you're in the world of open source, again, you are not applicable with this pricing changes. If you are using public repositories, open source, in any of these cases, this pricing is not applicable for you. One more time, if you are using GitHub Enterprise, don't worry about it. If you are a free GitHub user, pro GitHub user, or if you are using this in your organization without enterprise, then yes, you are applicable with this pricing changes. And typically this is only for private repos. Now, if you are in the world of open source, again, you can completely ignore these pricing changes. Now let's go and see what GitHub has to say. Although I explained it very clear to you, but still I'll quickly go through this doc. Make sure you follow this because now I'll highlight the important points from this doc. So what it says is historically self-hosted runners, people who are using it, they were using GitHub Actions for absolutely free of cost. But this was a burden for organization because the complete infrastructure for GitHub Actions, it can be the control plane cost or it can be internal cost within GitHub, that was only taken care by GitHub hosted runners. So whatever profit they get from the GitHub hosted runners, they are using it for the entire GitHub Actions ecosystem. So to avoid this and to make the system better, GitHub is introducing these pricing changes. And according to GitHub, only 4% of the existing customers are impacted by these changes. Right? This is very important to note. Only 4%. Why? Because enterprise subscribers are not affected, open source are not affected, public repos are not affected. And the background, I explained everything. So GitHub was talking about the internals in this documentation. Now, another important thing to note, there is this wonderful price comparison sheet provided by GitHub. I'll put this in the description. What is the current pricing and what will be from 1st of January 2026. So here GitHub shows you. Let's say you're going with GitHub hosted runners. Today, if you're using Linux to core as your GitHub hosted runner, the current pricing is 0.008 US dollars. But from 1st of January 2026, you will only get this for 0.006 US dollars. So overall, you get 25% profit or benefit. Why is this 25%? Again, the same calculation I explained you. Today, the pricing is 0.008 US dollars. Deduct 40% from it. I think it comes to 0.0048. And then add the new platform fee of 0.002 US dollars. Right? So deduct 40% from this and then add new platform fee. It will come to 0.006 US dollars. That's why instead of 40%, this is 25%. Now the same thing, right? Previously Linux 1 core, what? 0.002 US dollars. Deduct 40% from it and then add new platform fee of 0.002. That's why there is absolutely 0% difference in it. Same calculation for everything. Now this is very useful, this particular sheet, because in your organization, you can just look at the instance type that you're using. Let's say you're using Windows 4 Core. You can tell your management from 1st of January, you will get 31% discount. Instead of saying 40% off, then add platform fee, you can just tell them 31% discount. If your organization is using, let's say, self-hosted runners, then it's very straightforward. Your organization is subjected to 0.002 US dollars of platform fee, right? On top of that, you should again pay the AWS, Azure, wherever you are creating the virtual machine. One final time, for GitHub hosted runners, the pricing changes are effective 1st of January, but for self-hosted runners, that is the platform fee, is effective from 31st of March 2026. This is another difference. I hope this comparison provides you very detailed information, and now you are clear what exactly is GitHub Actions pricing change and how you as well as your organization are impacted with this pricing change. Let me know in the comment section if you have any more questions. And finally, I'll share all the useful resources link in the description. If you know someone who is using GitHub Actions, make sure you forward this video to them because they should understand the pricing change. See you all in the next video. Take care.